So, hello and welcome to Overdrive. We're in conversation with Sirish Vissa, the man behind VW Motorsport in India. Now, he runs a very successful one make car championship. It's been in the country for a decade now. The Polo came into India in 2010 and it's been
Right.
racing ever since. Sirish, thank you for talking with us. Take us through the VW Motorsport journey in India.
Well, actually, like you put it, we are now just over a decade old. So it's really a fantastic achievement for us. It's something we are very, very proud of. So when we started in 2010, our goal was that we wanted to showcase the product and the attributes that make a Volkswagen so special, right? What better way to do it than being able to demonstrate these attributes on a racetrack, because our cars are made for driving. We being the last major manufacturer to come into the market,
We said, hey, why don't we put our cars on a racetrack? Because then we can showcase, for example, the phenomenal driving dynamics, which makes the car fun to drive. Also, just demonstrate some of the safety aspects that go into our chassis, and which also help make the dynamics better. And of course, when we were doing all of this, we were also looking at the TDI engines back in 2010. And the goal was that we needed to showcase that TDIs can be fun and not only used in taxis or trucks. So that's the way we started off, and I think we were able to achieve pretty much all of these aspects or highlight all of these aspects with our motorsport program. So yeah, it was kind of fun. Then of course, over the years, we progressed from the initial TDI. We went on then to showcase also some of our DSG technology and the TSI engines, which we started in 2012 with the TSI and the DSG boxes, and that ran in the Polo Cup in 2012, 13, and 14. 15 and 16, we went to the Volkswagen Vento with again the same TSI engine with the DSG gearbox. And of course, even today, we continue with the TSI engine. But we've moved from 2017, when we started the Amio Cup, we moved away from DSG to a more of a racing gearbox, just because the cars were getting so much more quicker. And we wanted to give all the young drivers a car that would be a stepping stone for them to go from India to racing in, say, TCR globally.
Right. So we've actually come full circle in a way, because we started with Polo, we went to Vento, we went to the Amio, and now we're back with the Polo. Obviously, COVID has messed up the season to quite an extent.
Yeah.
But we saw the car at the Auto Expo, and it looks amazing. I mean, it is the Polo after all, so it's a familiar shape.
Right.
But what have you done with the new 2020 car that we'll hopefully see sometime this year?
Well, for us, we've been trying to evolve more and create sort of an evolution of our car. So we are not necessarily looking for a revolution at the moment. So we are building on the lessons learned from the past decade, if you will, with the new Polo Cup car. So we have the same with the 1.8 liter TSI engine, but putting out a little bit more power than it did in the Amio. So in the Amio, we're at 205, we're at 210 now. But more importantly than that, now we have a push-to-pass functionality in the car. So that gives you an additional boost of about 20 horsepower. So it'll make a lot more fun and adds a level of strategy to the whole racing side of it. But the biggest change, I would say, would be the driving dynamics side of it, where we've tweaked, for example, the way the roll cage is welded into the chassis, and also reworked the entire suspension setup to give us a car that is a lot better to drive than the Amio was. And I would say, we set ourselves up a very tough challenge with this, because while we can extrapolate a lot more out of the car in terms of driving dynamics, that makes the car quite nervous and very edgy for a newcomer. So we have to balance that out, and it's always a challenge to do that. And I think we've done a pretty good job. At least that's what we've seen in testing. So we have to wait and see once we get all the other drivers into the car.
This actually begs the question, race on Sunday, sell on Monday is the oldest mantra in the book. I mean, for a lot of manufacturers, it's the reason why they go racing in the first place.
Right.
But in a market like India, which we've seen can be quite unpredictable at times, does it work?
I believe it does, because if you look at the Polo, right, we focused our motorsport program sort of around the Polo in one way or another for the past decade. So while we weren't racing the Polo, we were rallying the Polo. But the Polo is sort of something that's been there throughout. And when you look at it, we are a premium car, a premium hatch. And we still have huge demand for this car. Like you mentioned, it's now a 10-year-old car. But I think because of what goes into our cars and the fact that we are showcasing this car in a very dynamic way on the racetrack or on rally stages, there is still a lot of, I would say, a cult following for this car. And so we are quite pleased to see how well it's doing in the market.
I think one of the big reasons that the Polo has such a cult following when it comes to enthusiasts is obviously the TSI and DSG combination, specifically the engine. I think the 1.2 TSI when it was introduced when 2012, 2013.
I think it was 2013, I believe.
Right.
Well, 12 in our race car and 13 on the road cars.
Right. And immediately, I think it was immediately the best thing that anybody who loved driving could buy.
Yes.
No questions asked, no holds barred. It was easily the most fun thing that you could drive. What's the progression been like? Because the Polo's just come in, it's a 10-year-old car, like you said, but it's coming with a brand new engine. Could you tell us a little bit about,
So the current Polo that you and I can go buy from the dealership today has a 1-liter TSI engine in it. And this is sort of the latest in our series of TSI engines. And it's a phenomenal power plant. It's a 3-cylinder, 1-liter engine, and it puts out quite a lot more power than the 1.2-liter that it replaces. And being a 1-liter, so smaller displacement, we are getting same power, actually more power, similar amount of torque. And, because it's smaller, we also have now the advantage of better fuel economy and lower emissions for regular use. And the great thing about our TSI engines, whether you look at the 1-liter or even the 1.8-liter in the Cup car, right? The TSI technology is quite phenomenal. Okay, TSI for all of you, the expansion is turbocharged stratified injection. It's a direct injected engine, which means that unlike the old days where you would squirt fuel into the inlet port, the fuel now is injected directly into the cylinder. So the advantage is that we can run higher compression. The higher compression gives us more torque, obviously. And because we are directly injecting fuel into the cylinder, that means that we can control the fuel a lot more accurately. So we can technically use a little less fuel than we would otherwise, and that improves efficiency in terms of fuel economy and emissions. So yeah, it's a win-win that way.
If you were to broadly classify the differences between a direct injection engine and a regular engine, I mean, we've hit upon the advantages of a direct injection.
Yeah.
But where does it come into play?
So if you sort of look at a normal port injected engine, right? It's called port injection because you are squirting fuel into the inlet port, and the fuel then swirls in with the air as it's going into the combustion chamber. Whereas with the direct injected engines, the fuel doesn't have anything to do with the inlet port, so to speak. The airflow is going in, and now we are squirting the fuel in at the right time so that we are probably doing it just before the piston reaches top dead center when you have to actually spark it off. So that means that the engine is more I would say, resistant to knock. I am simplifying things quite a bit, of course, but so the engine is more resistant to knock. That means that I can afford to run a much leaner mixture, and that lean mixture is what gives us sort of the better emissions and better fuel economy. Whereas the port fuel injected engine, because you're injecting it into the port, while a majority of the fuel is mixing in with the air and going into the cylinder, you also have some of the fuel that gets sort of that's there wetting the inlet tract and not actually going into the engine. So these are very, very minute things, but they all make a big difference when you're trying to look at sort of dropping CO2 emissions and you start trying to look at better fuel economy.
I mean, that's fascinating. I'm sure fuel economy isn't the reason direct injection is used in Formula One engines, but you can see the lineage right there.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, the reason why we've gone to direct injected engines now with most forms of motorsport is the fact that everywhere now, overall engine efficiency is important, which means that you have a controlled amount of fuel and you're trying to get the maximum number of laps out of it. And in F1's case, you've got a maximum amount of fuel that you have to carry. You can carry on board, and you have a limit on how much you can use, and so on and so forth. So you need to get probably I would say you have to be as lean as possible in terms of the mixture. And still keep the whole thing reliable. So yeah, direct injection makes a lot of sense that way.
That brings me to my next question, which is, you guys have been racing TSI engines for close to a decade now.
Yeah.
How's it been in terms of reliability?
We are actually pretty good. I mean, we've not had really any failures with the engine per se. And we are pushing the engines to the limit. And we're quite happy with it. And the great thing about the TSI engines is with the turbocharger and a small displacement engine making reasonably good power, and it's not being stressed to the limit like you would an NA engine, right? A normally aspirated engine, you have to literally rev it so that you are pushing everything to breaking point to get the power out of it. Whereas with a turbocharged engine, which is what the T is in a TSI, we are able to actually not stress the engine so hard and get the efficiency out of it in terms of power and torque. So we are actually, the engine will run and run and run. And, for example, we've run, when we were running the 1.4 TSI, we ran the engines for 5 years without anything other than just an oil filter change and an engine oil change at the end of a season.
Pretty impressive to be running a championship grid filled with 20 cars with rookie drivers for 5 seasons.
Yeah,
I remember I've actually had the very lucky opportunity to drive the Polo TDI first, and then I raced with you guys in one of those media races in the Vent TSI. And I still remember very strict instructions that you gave us when we were going out. And you were like, when you see those red lights flash, please shift up. Obviously, in the excitement of being on the track for the first time, there were a couple of missed shifts, but the car stayed good through it all. We had a bunch of us media folk on the grid, and we didn't break anything. I think that says a lot.
Yeah, that does say a lot. I mean, we always are trying to minimize the stresses. So essentially, engines don't like it when they are living on the rev limiter for too long because you have too many torque reversals and everything happening. But which is why we ask you guys to shift and not just live on the rev limiter. But other than that, they are bulletproof engines, and we are really, really happy with our results so far.
Right. I think it was also quite telling that you didn't actually have to live at the rev limiter because the power was coming in so strong right in the mid range.
Yeah,
Actually, it paid off to short shift a little bit. So
correct.
if I think I remember the red line on the race engines being what, about 62, 6400 RPM. And
Yeah, around there. Yeah.
yeah, and we were shifting at 55, 5600 RPM, and we're still getting pretty decent lap times considering
Yeah, I
our
mean,
limited skills. Yeah.
well, it's that's the advantage, right? With the turbocharger, what happens is you can manage the torque output of the engine a lot better. Like for example, the engine that's in the new Polo, and the same thing that similar to the engine that was in the Amio before it, we have a linear torque curve, which means that the engine is very predictable. Same thing. If you look at when you look at a normally aspirated engine, you have to really rev the engine to get the torque and to get the power out of it. Whereas with the turbocharged engine, with a good, efficiently designed turbocharger, you have torque right from sort of little above idle, or maybe 1,500 RPM. You have torque all the way through, so that you never feel a lack of that oomph in the engine.
Speaking of oomph from the engine, could you tell us a little bit about your Polo R2? Uh, we saw the car at your 10-year celebrations at Chennai, but
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately we didn't get to drive it because of lack of time. And that was one of the cars I was really, really looking forward to drive. Uh,
With
Small
the
engine, big power. How have you guys done it?
well, again, I mean, it's a question of with the any of the cars. For us, the advantage is that when you are turbocharging the engine, you can use a smaller displacement engine, force more air in, so you get more efficiency out of the engine. So it's just a question of managing your I would say the turbocharger sizing, getting the that right, managing the to cool the inlet air down enough so that it's in sort of in a range where the engine works efficiently. And that's really it in simple terms. It's a lot more complicated in real life, but yeah.
If you were to build on the differences between the TSI power that VW has for the road and the TSI power that you guys have for the track, what would that boil down to?
On a track, we are not worried about anything to do with emissions, so we are only worried about what we get in terms of power out of it. It's exactly the same. For example, the engine that we run in our current Polo Cup car, which we ran in the Amios before it, is the same engine that was offered in the Polo GTI, and with zero differences. Literally, the engine comes out of a crate and goes into a race car. What are different, however, I mean, the main difference is the electronic package that we use. So we use a Motec ECU, so we have more control over what the mapping is for the engine, if you will. That is why we are able to get more power out of it, because unlike a road car, where you have to design this so that regardless of where a customer is going to go get fuel and the type of fuel going in it, the car has to live and be reliable. Whereas for us, we know exactly what fuel we are going to put into the race car. So we know more accurately what the octane numbers are and so on. And we know what conditions it's being used in. So we can remove a lot of the additional safety features that you have in a road car engine, which is why we can get a little bit more power out of it without any hardware changes.
So this is interesting because you guys actually run a very, very cool initiative called the Customer Sport Initiative.
Mhm.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because that has a lot to do with the road car tech going into race cars that anyone can buy.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we wanted to be a sort of responsible citizen when it comes to motorsport in India. So what we do is we have, through our customer sport initiative, we actually are able to support anybody that wants to race or rally in a Volkswagen car. So they can come to us and we can either help them with setting up a car that they've already got built, We can build a car for them to whatever spec they need. At every motorsport event, usually we have at least one or two engineers from Volkswagen Motorsport so that they can help these customers extract the maximum out of their cars.
I still remember my first rally was the rally of Chikmagalur last year, where I drove down from Bombay to cover it, and I was surprised to see the number of polos on the grid. In my head, I kept thinking that, yeah, okay, the polos are popular.
Yeah.
Maybe 5, 10 cars on the grid. I think that was closer to 20.
Yeah, I think with rallying, 50% of the grid of INRC are people driving polos. And that's really, a phenomenal achievement for us because unlike some of the other people, we don't run a factory team. But without running a factory team, we're able to compete, we are able to win rallies, and we are able to win championships. So that's a big testament to all of our customers and the efforts they put in. Of course, we play a small role in it by supporting them, whether it is with parts or know-how and so on. So yeah, it's really a phenomenal partnership between all of our customers and us. Well, you know what? It comes down to, I would say, the overall design of the Polo chassis. While we aren't the lightest car out there, we have sort of the structural integrity of our body shells is phenomenal. Because they are already so strong and so rigid as a road car, when you add in the additional things that we do to make it either a rally car or a race car, which is do the seam welding and to add in a roll cage and so on, the car just shines. It has such phenomenal stiffness in terms of the chassis at that point in time that now you're able to get the suspension set up in a much better way. To give you an idea, right? When you are trying to work with suspensions, which is a spring and a shock absorber or damper package, you have certain amount of stiffness on the spring. So if you have a chassis that isn't stiff enough, then what happens is when you start going heavier or stiffer with the springs, instead of the spring on the shock absorber or the suspension actually moving and flexing, you'll start to put that load into the chassis and the chassis starts moving and flexing. The minute you do that, you can't control what the chassis does and you can't tune it so easily. Because our chassis are so stiff to begin with, and then when you add all the roll cage and everything, they get even stiffer. Now what happens is the spring and the dampers, you're able to tune in a much better way without having the chassis being sort of an uncontrollable member, if you will, of the suspension, which is the reason why they are able to get the cars to perform so well.
Right. Given your previous experience as a Le Mans race engineer, speaking highly about the chassis rigidity of a road car that's been converted for racing use, really does say something about the way these cars are built.
Like I said, I'm really proud to be associated with and be a part of this phenomenal family at Volkswagen. But we have, for example, the number of weld points that we have in our chassis are higher than most of the other competitors in our class. We have some very high strength steel components that go in to reinforce the key parts of the structure. And the bigger thing with the Polo, with most of our cars, actually with all of our cars, is that the roof structure is welded onto the chassis. It's laser welded on. So it's not a separate piece, so to speak. So the entire thing behaves as one, composite member instead of, multiple different parts that are all riveted or welded together. That makes a huge, huge difference to the overall stability and the rigidity of the chassis.
Right. I think for viewers who are interested in the art of racing, and obviously with your one make championship being the only of its kind currently in India, What's the procedure for somebody who's looking to get into racing, to join racing? I know we're not going to talk about this season because I'm not sure what plans are. You'll have to tell me about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically, to be a part of the championship, okay. The way we run it is that we usually have our selections for our one make championship at the beginning of the year. And this year, for example, we had it in the beginning or end of Jan, beginning of Feb. This year, it's unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We're waiting to see. But normally, we have the driver selection then where we do it on in go karts at the Indy karting facility in Bombay now. And we put them through various sort of exercises, and we are evaluating drivers based on fitness, based on their ability to follow instructions, consistency, and of course also aggressiveness. You have to be aggressive as a race car driver. So once we do all of this, then we shortlist the people that will be a part of the championship. And then usually before the season starts, we spend at least 3 days on a racetrack in the race cars where we give them a complete racing school, if you will. But this is the way normally it works. And the best way of getting in touch with us is to follow us on our social media handles or on the Volkswagen India website. And that's where we usually make all of the announcements of what we are doing next.
Right. So for the viewers who are curious about it still, what are the costs involved with getting into either one make racing, into rallying, or if they just want a fun car, one of the excellent crazy products that you have in your customer sport initiative?
Well, the customer sports side of it really, I mean, the prices depend on what level you want to build a car to. To give you an idea, today a competitive car to participate in and in the Indian National Rally Championship, you have 3 classes of the INRC. You have INRC 1, 2, and 3. 3 being sort of the class that allows the least number of modifications. So an INRC 3 car will set you back anywhere from sort of 10 lakhs all the way up to about 18 lakhs, depending on what spec you build it to. And an INRC 2 car will be anywhere from sort of the 16 to about 25 or so, depending again on the spec you build it to. And the top class car, which is our Polo R2, for example, is around 42 to 48 lakhs, again, depending on how crazy you want to go in terms of the spec. In terms of the one make championship, it costs you maybe about 9.5 lakhs for a season. And basically that 9.5 lakhs covers all of the basic maintenance, fuel, tires, and your entry fee for the one make championship. And it also, as part of that, you also get, for example, our driver coaches who are there for the whole season. It also gives you, for example, a Volkswagen driving suit, which is included in the cost. So it's actually very good value for money because when we used to run Polo Cup in Germany, for example, it used to be 75,000 euro plus. And so this thing is quite heavily subsidized by Volkswagen to be able to make it affordable enough for India.
Right. Okay. So just switching tack a little bit to get back to the road technology. Now, obviously, there have been some concerns over the reliability of TSG transmissions in the past. I think it was very well addressed by VW India. But a point that a lot of people don't really realize is that it's these same DSG transmissions that we use in your race car, weren't there?
Yeah, I mean, so we use a 6-speed version in the race cars, and we raced basically 5 years without doing anything to those cars in terms of the transmission side of it. We would, like I said, you know, our service for our race cars is usually once a year. So at the end of a season, we would change the oil in the gearbox, and that was it. I think one of the things that we all need to keep in mind is there are certain driving habits that are better than others. if you remember, right, back in the old days when we had the Fiats around, a lot of people would, when they were on an incline, you would see them stopped at that over there with the clutch partially engaged so that they would hold the car in position, which is great when you have 30 horsepower in the engine and very little torque. You can afford to do that. The minute you are getting more and more power and torque in it, if you try and do that, you'll end up burning up the clutch. And so one of the things, for example, when you're driving an automatic car, is that when you are stationary, if you have your foot on the brake, then the clutches are disengaged. There's nowhere, no anything, and it's not a problem. However, if you're sitting there and you have just sort of leave everything and you have the clutches sort of partially engaged, it's the same thing like, you know, slipping a clutch on an incline, which isn't really healthy for the clutch. So there are a lot of things I think that maybe you know, we all need to understand also a little bit more um, in terms of how to do things. I certainly had to learn when I started driving automatics versus manuals. So I think that's part of it. But for sure, I think you know, we've done a good job with addressing some of the concerns, and we found also ways of improving things so that it is a lot better now.
Uh, there is one new technology which could take some getting used to, but we're not sure is it. Now, we've driven the T-Roc with the 1.5 TSI Evo with the cylinder deactivation technology. So
Yeah.
you've now got TSI making things more efficient, and you've got cylinder deactivation which is running it on half its cylinders. How does that work?
So essentially, you know, as we get to the stage where you have stricter emission norms, you need to find ways of reducing combustion, right? The great combination of the Evo 1.5 Evo engine combined with the DSC gearbox, what works really well is that it essentially shuts off two of the cylinders out of four when the torque demand isn't there. And for example, if you're on a highway, you're just cruising along where the engine is not accelerating the car and it's just maintaining speed, you don't have the torque demand then. So then the ECU recognizes this and shuts off a couple of cylinders so that it saves on the fuel consumption. And the minute that you sort of do anything that requires the power, it re-engages the cylinders back, and of course combined with the ultra quick shifts on a DSC gearbox, you know, you really don't feel a whole lot of it. It is sort of seamless to the end user, if you will.
That's true. In our time spent with the car, the only indication that you were running on two cylinders only was a little light in the digital instrumentation, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that the whole idea is that, you know, that's the focus, right? You want technology to behave in a way that is seamless to the end user, at the same time have all the efficiency and so on that you need from the current generation or future generation of cars.
Right. So new TSI engines in India is very exciting for the road cars. Obviously, we've driven the Polo and Vento with the 1 liter TSI and 6 speed
Right.
manual gearbox, and I think the engine is a future classic. The same way that people like me can afford cars that came out maybe 10, 15 years back with these really stellar
Right.
engines. I'm
Yep.
sure kids growing up next 10 years, they're just going to be trawling through used car websites for TSIs. I can already see it happening. It's a future classic.
I
Uh,
hope so. I mean, you know, I'm glad you think so. I mean, we are really proud of our TSI technology. And you know, we've been playing around with the 1 liter now for our rally program in terms of customer sport. So we're enjoying that engine. It's so much fun to work with. And stay tuned. I mean, hopefully soon we'll have an R2 version of the 1 liter TSI, which should be a lot more fun.
okay, you've got to give me details of how far you've been able to take the 1 liter engine, because I hear a lot of very good news about basically the reliability and the stoutness
Mhm.
of 1 liter engine. I hear figures
Yeah.
as high as 180 horsepower with maybe just a very simple turbo swap. And these
Yeah,
parts are
it's a
the 1 and the 1.5.
Yeah, I mean there are certain parts that you can use on both of them, but yeah, I mean it's essentially maybe a modified turbo and a couple of other bits and pieces. Basic most important is a remap of the engine in terms of the electronics and so on. And yes, we haven't gotten to 180 yet to the point where I'm happy with it, but that's quite easily doable. We are at the moment pushing about 160 plus with our test engine. So we'll get there with the more power soon, hopefully.
Super. Okay. And I have to ask you about the possibility of seeing the 1 liter TSI on a track. We've seen it on rally stages.
Yeah.
What about the racetrack?
On a racetrack, I would say it's going to be a little while longer, just because we've already invested into the 1.8 at the moment, so that will run for at least the next couple of years. But we are working on the 1 liter and all the development we do with the engine, whether we do it, I mean, regardless of what it goes into, whether it's a rally or a race, the amount of work that goes into the development is the same. And so once we have the engine working well for rallying, it'll work well on a racetrack as well. And for sure, it'll be lighter than anything we have now. That makes a huge difference for sure on a racetrack, because if I can pull, about 30 kilos of weight off of the front end of the car, it'll make the car handle a lot better.
The 30 kilos of just engine weight sitting on the front suspension on those axles would make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
exactly. I mean,
so I think you've given us exactly what we wanted to hear. The fact that that 30 kilos is coming off the front of the car. I'm sure there's a 1 liter race car somewhere. So,
well,
right. So TSI in Indian motorsport, we've seen various iterations of it. We've seen the 1.4 twin charge, which has been engine of the year multiple times. We've seen the 1.3, which was in the GTI.
Yeah.
We've seen the 1 liter in the Polo rally cars. What next? Is there a possibility the 1.5 could go into something?
Well, you never know. I mean, look, for us, the focus is now we are, if you know the history of the motorsport program, right? We started off with everything being done in Germany to the point now where we've migrated, where all of the development work is done by my team here in India. And with our drivetrain as well, our engine choice, the idea is that we want to go to the point where we are using engines that we are making in India, so that the overall cost comes down for the end user. So that is the focus for us, and we are working toward it. And you will see, for example, more things happening in India as and when those engines start being made here. So yeah, I mean, we are open to it. At the moment, there are too many unknowns to talk about, or too many variables to talk about. But for sure, you will see more of these engines in our race and rally cars.
Okay, brilliant, Sirish. That's just given me another little clue as to maybe a possibility of a 2-liter TSI race car at some point, which I'm not sure about. But thank you, Sirish. This has been most illuminating. Like I said, I'm very, very sure that the TSI is a future classic. It's just one of those engines that put a smile on your face. For a turbo to rev that willingly up to redline and be so strong at the same time. That's really something.
That's honestly, that's German engineering for you. It's that's something that we pride ourselves in. And I'm glad to hear your comments on the engine, and fingers crossed that it is a future classic. But for sure, we enjoy working on them, and it's a pleasure for us to see all of the enthusiasts get behind it and have fun in our cars.
Right, Sirish. Well, I do hope that motorsport gets back on track sometime this year. We
I'm
heard
hoping
plans
to.
to come in September, but we're not that far away from September.
Yeah,
I
we
think,
aren't. But honestly, I think for us, the focus at the moment, more important than restarting the motorsport program, is to ensure safety of everybody. So that's the primary concern for us. It's the safety of not only the people in on my team, and all the drivers, but also the people in general. I mean, the broader consumer market in India. So for us, safety is the most important thing. We can always get back to motorsport, but we need to do it safely. So yeah, we need to make sure and see how things go. And obviously, as we get more and more directives from the government of India and the FMSCI, we can also respond to it accordingly.
right. I do hope that I get a chance to drive one of the VW Motorsport's latest creations very soon. Thank you so much for talking with us and giving us all this great insight into TSI, the automatic DSG gearboxes, and just
Yeah.
how reliable they've proved over the years in a motorsport use scenario. I think,
Yeah. And the thing about motorsport is it's a torture test, right? I mean, you are pushing things, in ways that you never would on a road. So the fact that they live and they survive so well in the harshest of harsh environments is a testament to the quality of the build. And yeah, it should be better for you as an end user using it as your daily driver.
right, Sirish. Thanks for talking with us. I hope to catch you soon.
Great. Thank you, Simran. Take care.